All right, I want to talk a bit about LGBTQ plus people and new workplaces. Now, I also want to talk about success. Success in a new field or getting into a new field. And possibly, going out from one workplace and into a new one. People can kind of have some anxiety around, kind of what that looks like. And what might be happening at those times. So, okay, so those are going to be like the main topics. All right, so I guess first things first, I always kind of do this, not always, but you guys probably notice, I kind of start out, likely because I'm recording in the morning, kind of with that whole, check in with yourself, how was your day? How are you doing? I'm starting to write down, now, I think I've explained this. I don't really write it down to review it. I write down so I have a record of kind of what goes on with my sleep, because sleep is important. Sleep is going to be a part of your health, your mental health, physical health, and success. So I write down, the time I am kind of getting ready for bed. I started writing down, if I slept good the night before, kind of what time I get up. So I wrote down that I felt like I slept good Thursday night. It's Friday morning right now. I wrote this for Thursday morning, that I felt like I slept good Wednesday night. Woke up at 7:20 a.m., which was a little late for Thursday. That I had I usually write that I had, like, when I have caffeine. So I kind of wrote this a little bit backwards, but basically, I see what I did. I wrote today's information on yesterday's information. I wrote basically that, that I had an extra coffee Thursday afternoon. I had a little bit of a THC edible around 7:30 p.m. Vaped a little at 8:30 p.m. and had one full melatonin tablet of the ones that I've been taking half. I had one full one at probably around 8:30 p.m., which was really early, and I started kind of dozing off around like 9 something. I don't think I actually went to sleep till a little bit after 10. And then coming into Friday, I got up. It's 7:01 a.m. right now. I got up at like 6:20 a.m. and had some gulps of C4 and a cup of yerba mate. Did I finish it? Yeah, I just finished a cup of yerba mate. Again, you're not really supposed to be drinking C4 with yerba mate on the same day, but the amount of C4 I'm drinking is not like a whole can of it. I'm drinking it was probably like a fourth or a fifth of what would have been in the can. I transferred into a clear water bottle so I can see kind of like the percentage, because it fills the whole bottle. so I can see kind of like the amount that I'm drinking. It wasn't that much. It's not the best drink in the morning. It tastes like soda, and so to me it's kind of gross to wake up and just be like drinking soda. Soda, you know, it's not super carbonated anymore because I've had it for a few days. I usually write down my dreams if I remember them. And then I started writing down kind of like how I felt when I woke up. Like I felt in my mind like I wanted to go back to sleep till like 7:30 a.m. But I know I want to get some stuff done, you know, go get out of the house a little, do some deliveries around 11. I have a lot to do with some podcasting and e-commerce tasks, and I have some stuff website-wise that I want to optimize today and check in with today as far as the analytics and things. And I did feel like I slept enough. I put near 10:30 p.m. and I only woke up once, probably near midnight. I don't really know exactly. I didn't write it down. And that my mindset is that I want to get back to the previous task I was working on yesterday, and that I'm pretty motivated about studying and wanting to work in the fields, the new fields that I'm studying in. And last night I was listening to this this audiobook. It had a lot of interesting stuff to say about money and how people get services, and your money is your proof of that you've provided services to people, and it recommends that people have a positive outlook on money instead of thinking of it as like a bad thing, because culturally, you know, there is this kind of like, oh, like everybody needs money, you know, mostly, unless you want to live like completely self-sufficiently off the grid, but everybody needs money. But culturally we kind of have this relationship with money where it's like, even though you need money, you're kind of taught to not really get too involved with it, or there's kind of a shame factor with money, which is kind of weird. And I've been kind of looking at different cultural views. This book I'm reading just happens to be by a Rabbi Daniel Lapin. I'm not trying to make some kind of prejudice statement about like Jewish people and money. It's just I like his outlook about money. The Bible itself talks a lot about money. You know, but I feel like, you know, growing up in a society that's very heavily influenced by traditional Christianity, people are kind of taught, you know, be humble with your finances and maybe don't get too much money. It's kind of almost seen as like a bad thing if you're like trying to like seek not financial stability, but like past financial stability. Like if you're trying to seek wealth, I think there's kind of a culturally kind of like you're almost discouraged from that. Sometimes it kind of depends, but it is kind of like there is this kind of negative view of people who have money. Like you hear it all the time where people are like, oh, like is your family rich or whatever. Like I have this friend that was explaining their life, their, you know, families, land. I guess they have some kind of land off of a lake that them and I think multiple other families kind of have ownership of. And I don't know the exact details, but I remember at work, some people were kind of joking around about like, oh, like you guys have these woods and lake house and like, and it was kind of like a joke, almost about like teasing this person because they didn't sound like they were bragging about their family's money, but I feel like people were kind of like sarcastic and teasing them because of their money. Like, kind of like, oh, like your family has money, and like, oh, you have like a lake house, and like they kept kind of bringing it up. And after a while, I got a little uncomfortable with it because I was like, it's kind of nobody's business. And they were just like explaining, like they weren't bragging about it. They were like explaining, I guess, where they were going to go on their trip, or like where they had been, or part of the trip where they had to kind of like engage with family about this property or something. It wasn't even like a big deal why they were talking about it, but people kind of got all bent out of shape about it. Not really, they weren't like mad, but they brought it up multiple times, and it was just kind of weird. And you do kind of hear people say like, oh, like they grew up rich, or like whatever. Like people want to like, crap on people that grew up with money or grew up around money. I mean, I know a lot of people that grew up with money, and most of them are pretty humble people that I know. I mean, I know people who, I'd say most of the people I knew who grew up with money was like fluctuating money. It was like, yeah, they had money, but there was also debt, and there was also the stress of the family's debt because their parents or family wasn't really like good with money. So sometimes they had money, then other times they didn't. And then sometimes they'd have like nice cars, and other times they'd like pawn the cars or be like in debt borrowing money and stuff. And so there was kind of that, but it was never, I don't know, like it was like they had money, but it was not always something that was, people weren't really taking care of what they needed to be taken care of. And then but I knew other people with money, like, the area I was mostly raised in it's kind of low key. Like, I would say, like, it's not necessarily an impoverished area of LA. I'll put it that way. I mean, it's a beach city. Like, that should explain it. It's like, I don't live like on the beach, but I mean, you can walk there. It's not that far. Like, but like, I don't know. I kind of get why people have a hang up with people having money, but I feel like if they're not bragging about it and it's part of their culture, and the way that they got there is because their family was able to kind of overcome a lot of barriers. I mean, people should be proud and happy, not like jealous and mad that other people have money. And I guess what I'm trying to say is learn from people. Try to learn from people. I mean, yes, there's systemic oppression. Yes, there's racism, and you might get denied educational or job opportunities because of being LGBT, or being a certain race, or being a certain gender, or being, there are multiple things that come up. But still, I mean, if you want to try and do it, try and do it. I would say the best thing, I'm gonna go into some stuff that I'm kind of seeing around me. The best thing that I'm kind of seeing around me is people who would technically beat the odds. So I'm part of a lot of communities where it's minorities, black people, women, and men. There's not really a lot of talk about like LGBT community. I think mostly because it's black community. That is something that I find a little bit separating. Like it's kind of like, in a lot of in a lot of black spaces culturally, people do kind of tend to start talking about, Christian religion or some form of religion or traditional beliefs where, people aren't so much LGBT people aren't so much understood. I mean, it's kind of now coming out. I'd say since there've been more Black Pride events and more when it comes to Black Lives Matter, I think more kind of awareness was raised about the Qpoc community, and I feel like things are kind of not everywhere, not in every state, but I would say in Los Angeles, I have noticed like that bit of a shift of where there is a little bit more open communication. I think the first Juneteenth festival I went to, I saw a lot of LGBT, Qpoc women, people with, they were either allies or LGBT females, or at least they were presenting as females, and they were walking around holding hands. I saw a lot of what looked like couples, people with maybe like scrunchies in their hair that were like rainbow, or like wearing like rainbow flags. Or this wasn't an LGBT event necessarily, but there were noticeably quite a few LGBT couples. I don't think I saw male couples that were like out like that, but there were plenty of LGBT females kind of showing their coupleness. They weren't hiding behind something. They were hugging, holding hands. Like, it wasn't like a whole bunch of people, but it was definitely a percentage just from walking around that I saw quite a lot of people. And I think it's a generational thing as well, that people are more comfortable with it. And it's LA, and I think we kind of know this is our city too, and LA has a pretty large LGBT population. There really aren't a lot of black queer spaces. I mean, they're made. There are like minority queer spaces that are kind of like made by other minorities. They rent out places and host events and stuff. But I would say within the black spaces in the tech world, there are some LGBT seeming people. I mean, people don't like just like, oh yeah, I'm gay, like just like start talking about it all the time. But it's like when you go through people's, I mean, your LinkedIn profile doesn't really say much, but sometimes people have like a rainbow on there or something. Or, you'll see like someone who is, a woman, masculine presenting black woman. There are quite a few of them, wearing suits or like button downs with ties and things, like on their LinkedIn profile photo. You see that. And I guess when it comes to talking about money and all that kind of stuff, I guess what I was wanting to get into is kind of what it's like being on the LGBT and being a Qpoc person, you know, in a space that is being more open to black people. Um, if you watch Anthony O'Neill, who came out of Dave Ramsey's brand in the finance world, he definitely has a lot of black people on, a lot of, you know, people who have Nigerian parents and were raised in the US and, you know, don't have an accent. The name maybe gives them away that they're not American black, but maybe they were born in the US, raised in the US. There's a lot of African groups of people that, you know, go into tech, and, you know, you see them kind of in these settings, getting interviewed by people like Anthony O'Neill or Tech is the New Black or Tech Bag Trey. There are a lot of black tech entrepreneurial people, and a lot of the stories, when you hear the stories, you know, it's not like people are like, oh yeah, I was born in an affluent family, and some were, you know, some were born in families where, you know, their parents and culture really caters toward education. I know in general, African cultures typically do. I was raised like that, in a culture that typically does, you know, promote education. You know, growing up, my job was to, you know, tend to, you know, my siblings, you know, be obedient and honest with my parents, and, you know, study, get good grades, do well in school. You know, that was my job, was to do good in school. I heard from, I think it was an episode of Run's House, where he was talking to his sons, or one of his sons, and he was saying, like, or somebody, I can't remember if it was Rev Run, it was somebody who was saying, you know, you know, my job is to go to work. If I were to go and get like a C or a D, you know, I wouldn't be bringing home what I do for this family, and I have to do a good job. And if I wasn't doing good, you know, you guys would be, you know, impacted by that. And your job as a student is to do good in school, you know. And I was kind of raised with that mentality. It's like looking around, my parents were always working, they were always working hard, you know. I can count on my hand the amount of days that my dad took off work from when I was a kid all the way through grad school. Other than when he switched jobs, when he switched to a different contract, which started happening more when I was in grad school, where he'd take longer breaks between contracts. But other than that, he was always working. I remember him being sick, home and sick from work, maybe once that I can actually remember, and it was before high school. He got really ill. He was okay, and then there was another time. Actually, that time I was in grad school, so I don't remember more than like one time of my dad actually staying home from work being sick. He had the kind of job where I'm pretty sure he could take days off and get paid for it. Like, you know, so just that kind of work ethic. I'm not saying it's healthy. I don't think I learned, like, just observing, I don't think I learned like a very healthy work ethic necessarily. Like a healthy work ethic, like, yes, work hard, but I think it was more like work hard and don't pay attention to your own needs. It was more like, I think that's more what I learned. And I did, you know, notice that kind of caught up with me in grad school, you know, when I was trying to get a doctorate. I talked about it before. I'm not going to go into that story, but basically I wasn't functioning because I was trying to substitute sleep and substitute physical health as far as what I was eating and how much I was sleeping or exercising, just those basics. I wasn't really doing them right. I was eating fast food almost every day. I was trying to go to sleep. I didn't really know about melatonin at that point, but I think either I heard it from a client or heard it from someone else that like they like when people say like, oh, I like to have a glass of wine at night, and then I kind of took that on. I was like, oh, I'll have like a beer at night. I'll have like a cider, and I started using that to kind of try to fall asleep, but it wasn't really restful sleep. But that's kind of all I knew. Like I never knew about anything you could take for sleep that was like natural. I never looked into it. Never talked to a doctor about it, and I wasn't like I don't think I had like an alcohol problem. I think there was a time when maybe me and my friends were kind of partying a little bit too much, but this wasn't that time. I think I did drink though. That was the first time I remember in my life like regularly drinking because it would like quiet down my mind so I could sleep, but it wasn't that much alcohol. It was maybe like a bottle of a cider per night from what I remember. I'm not saying that's healthy or a good decision. I mean, melatonin works better, CBD works better, CBN works better. There's a lot of things that I found that work better than alcohol. The alcohol didn't make me feel rested. I'm pretty sure it messed with my sleep cycles. But, between that and eating McDonald's however many times a week and I stopped going to the gym on a regular basis. And, that caught up with me. Um, I just couldn't really focus or study properly or manage my energy and my mental focus in a way that made sense. And I didn't notice it. I mean, I didn't realize it till probably like a couple years ago. I kind of realized why that how things could have gone better. And that's why, when I quit my other job, that was kind of the goal with, getting into a new field and quit that job that was mentally and emotionally too demanding with too little money to be dealing with all that, and then feeling like, okay, if I want to live financially the way I want to live, I'm going to have to live with people, and then having to deal with all that freaking situation of those housemates, and then just not being able to, live the way I want to live, it was like either keep doing the same thing and, the same job and see if there's any wiggle room within that job, which I tried, and there really wasn't. I tried to get a better pay rate up to what I needed. I tried to, talk to different companies and see kind of what their situation might be, and their pay rate wasn't even as good as the other one that I was offered. And so I realized, and I wasn't really into working in that field anymore. So I was kind of like, I want to do something more creative, more tech based, um, you know, and something I'm seeing is people, you know, once they get rolling and they're working in, like sales jobs or digital marketing jobs, advertising, that kind of stuff, and they're working for a company for a while, there's a lot of freelancing in these fields that people do, and a lot of outsourcing of work. And I'm not saying people are doing like shady things, like don't do what your work isn't allowing you to do, but I mean, there's a lot of ways of moving up that I'm seeing people do in these fields, and a lot of them aren't, going to like 4-year universities or getting master's degrees and all doctorates and all. I mean, it helps, to learn. I think it helps to have degrees. It kind of shows what you've done. It's a form of experience that people can look at and be like, okay, you finished this. You started something and finished it after multiple years of like grinding on this one field. You got this degree. You worked in a certain field with your degree, even if it was not the field you're going into. I think people do look at that. They see that you have a work ethic, and they see that you are able to kind of make things work. Um, you know, a lot of that is something that you do over time. You know, getting a master's degree. I keep the poster from my thesis, from my thesis presentation. Well, I think my thesis defense was on a PowerPoint, but I did a I did a few presentations, and one of them, I don't remember, it was like a conference of some kind, and I had a poster that I had printed from like Kinko's or something, black and white. It's a pretty big poster, not glossy, just basic. It was like $6 or $8 back then. It's probably more now. And I basically took some of the important slides, and it has an abstract introduction, the hypotheses, method, measures, stimuli, sample trial, some tables, some figures, some of the results, and conclusion, discussion, references, all kind of like on the poster, and it's there on my wall. And that's a project that took me 3 years to do, you know. um, and I can look at that and be like, dude, like I took 3 years, trying to like get to a point where I could get a pilot study done, having to design it and like research and review all these journal articles and like learn about what I was even trying to do. And working under a professor, which was really awesome. He was a really cool guy. um, he recognized that I was black and female, and he would bring it up, not in a way that was like weird. He was this old white man, but he would bring it up as like a positive thing. Like, he would mention like, there aren't a lot of black females in this field, and not in a way to discourage me, but he would just say like the way he was saying it is like, you are kind of a trailblazer, like, and I never thought of anything that he said as like some weird racist thing. Like, he was actually very encouraging. He's probably the first teacher or academic person in my life that kind of helped me push to my limits to see kind of what I was actually capable of. Because I remember when I would first go into the lab, I would never really, I wasn't comfortable answering questions. He would ask a question, and I would kind of just say, I don't know, because I was kind of like scared to give the wrong answer, and I could kind of see he was getting a little irritated. But then, when I was supposed to get some work done, I remember him saying like, let me see, what you've been working on. And I showed him these files of like, the worksheets that the participants were going to have to fill out, and kind of the questions and like all this stuff. I just made it on like, Microsoft Office and like Excel, and like printed out. It was like, just like, it was designed, like it wasn't like colorful or anything, but it was basically like all these cells that people were going to have to fill in, and kind of like what they were going to have to sign, and like where they would like tear off their name, and where they would sign up, like the sign up sheets and everything. It was actually like designed, like I had to put all the lines and the numbers and the titles and the footers and all this kind of stuff. And he kind of saw that, and he was like, okay, so you can put in the work, and you understand kind of what's going on, but it's just you putting it into words and like explaining it. And he was kind of saying like, you're gonna need to know how to explain this stuff. You're gonna need to get comfortable talking about it. And so it took years to kind of work on those kind of skills and being able to kind of talk about it. I mean, if anybody cares what the title of the project was, it was Native Language and Frequency of Word Usage Change V and B Phoneme Confusions in English Word Identification. Basically just looking at how people interpret the V and the B letters, and how they pronounce different words with different accents: English, Spanish, Japanese. Um, in some Spanish languages, the V and the B are a little bit more. There's a little bit of fluidity with them. Japanese doesn't have a V sound, and English has a very distinct V and B sound. I think the rules for V and B in Spanish are just a little bit different. So sometimes people say them in a different way, or there's like a softer version that in English you don't really say. But anyways, it was like this whole big project, and I had to have a whole bunch of participants. That's why it took an extra year, because I had to gather more data, because I had so many variables I was looking at. But I mean, I love the science stuff, I love the analytics, but I mean, I'm mentioning all this stuff to say that, even though I was raised in a household where I was taught, to, focus on academics and do well in school, when I looked around, I didn't see anybody that looked like me that seemed capable. I mean, I'll be honest, I didn't think, that black people were capable of doing, really amazing things academically. I had that viewpoint because I'd never seen it in my life. I wasn't raised in a black neighborhood. I wasn't even raised around black people. I hardly saw black people, other than the ones that were in the school, and most of them weren't from the neighborhood where I lived in. They're from like one or two cities over. They got permission to go to that school, and I saw rap videos. I saw, people like the Cosbys on TV, where it was like, okay, like they kind of made it. Or I'd see like Rev Run's house. I think there's a show called like Daddy's Little Girls or something like that he had with his daughters. I saw some glimpse, like maybe in the world of like sports and entertainment. And I saw those kind of business, entrepreneurial minded people. But most of the people I was around were white and Asian people, and I was, you know, I wasn't often seeing who can do what. Like it was kind of like in the back of my mind, and I think that held me back for years, just because I hadn't seen it. There was not that representation, and when there was a representation, it was so rare that I was like, well, maybe it's just not common because I don't see it. I mean, Obama became president when I was in grad school, when I was getting my master's. There were things that I kind of saw, but it was always few and far between, and that's not good, that's really not good. I mean, we had Black History Month in school and stuff, but it was kind of like, oh, you get a month to talk about all these people from the 1800s and 16 and 1700s who did all these amazing things. Like, we never learned anything modern. I don't think our teachers knew. They were so disconnected. It's kind of interesting when you ask people. I've been watching some shows, like some stand-up and some shows where people are on stages and they interview them and they're like, oh, like, do you know, how many black people do you know? And there's so many people that don't know any black people. It's like, you don't know. I don't know. It's just kind of a weird thing. But I think there is a dynamic with, black culture when it comes to the education system that does get overlooked, where it's like, when you look around, all the school I've gone to, I've had one black professor. One. I went through community college for 3 years. I went to a bachelor's program 2 years. I went to grad school for 3 years, got a master's, and then tried to get a doctorate. I was there for nearly like 3 years. One black professor, one, Dr. Thomas Parham, who taught like some kind of African American studies at UCI. And it's like, you know, the higher up you get in certain fields, you see less and less minorities that are black. You know, in my grad program, I was one of the only black people other than this Nigerian priest guy. Um, when I was trying to get my doctorate, and I think when I was getting my master's, there were two black females. I don't think we had any black males in our cohort. Um, just really not a lot of black people, like almost none. And it was really just, when you don't see certain things around you, you kind of question. Um, and it took me a while to get to a place where I was like, I can do it. Like I had to like see myself doing it, because I doubted myself for a while. I think I could have gotten better grades if I would have known that it's just learning how to study. It's not like a racial thing, but I didn't know how to study. I just thought, oh, I don't know how to do it. I'm not as good as the other students. I don't know if I attributed it to my race or what, but I didn't know. I was just like, something's up. Um, I'm living proof that, you know, you can get degrees. You got to know how to play the game and follow what, you know, almost follow the herd. Like I had classmates, um, friends who were local friends that were kind of in the same, not exact track of like the major and everything. We were all different majors, but I'd be like, okay, they're applying for these types of programs. Okay, they're doing volunteer work. Okay, they're in Mesa. They're doing this, they're doing that. And I would kind of like participate in different stuff just because I saw what they were doing. Um, and so I kind of had a lot of stuff to put like on my resume and experience that I was having, just because I was looking around and like, what's everybody else doing? Like I didn't know what I was doing. I was just, okay, get the grades I need to get, do the work I need to do for school, and then with extracurricular stuff, do it this way. When my friends were gonna go study, I would go study with them. We would study at Borders and study at Barnes and Noble and study at Denny's and study all over town. And we studied a lot, and I saw that, and I was kind of like, okay, like we would study almost every night till like almost 9 or 10, or even sometimes almost 12 at night. And then we'd have later classes in the daytime, and we do good in school. Like that's how we did it. That's how I did it. I just followed what the people were doing that were doing well. And I think that's that kind of transfers into career, because it's like I'm noticing with these other fields, it's like, okay, follow what the other people do who are doing well. A lot of people post their morning routines or their routines online, and it's like a lot of these people in these tech fields I start seeing, they work out, they they exercise regularly multiple times a week, they wake up early in the morning. So this is why I've started having these habits over a long time now, but there are other reasons why, but it just kind of suits me. But I start seeing, okay, they go to the gym. Okay, they wake up early and they do, maybe they read. Okay, they wake up early, maybe they write. Okay, they wake up early, they have some coffee. They're doing this before work. They're doing that before work. They're working, they're doing this at the beginning to get like these entry level positions. They're working in these types of jobs, even if it doesn't pay. They're doing this, to get to that next level. They're, going to these conferences and mingling with other people. They're, engaged, you know, with community, and they're putting themselves out there, they're online, they're creating content about their journey, you know, what are they doing? What was I doing? You know, what's the comparison? You know, what am I doing versus what are they doing? Um, and I think sometimes to get to the same place that the successful people are, you got to learn what they do, study what they do, and then do that, you know. I mean, if you have other types of minority status types of things that you might consider a barrier, I mean, you can use that to your advantage because you can create community around it, you know. Tech is the new black, you know, and Anthony O'Neill talking about finance and all that, they noticed that the black community didn't have people like them talking about how to fix your finances, how to get into tech. You know, there weren't any people out there that looked like them, and so they made the content of people looking like them. They became the people talking about how to get there, how to get financially stable, how to build wealth, how to build generational wealth, how to, you know, get a job that pays really good without going to school and becoming a doctor, you know, and going into debt doing that. I'm not against traditional schools. It's just a lot of times it's so expensive that to get there in a timely manner, to get there along the timeline they want you to use, it's going to take more, it takes time, it takes more money to do it fast. If you're able to do it slow, you know, you have to work more so you don't have to deal with all the loans. I mean, when I went to a UC, it was like 20K a year. I don't know how much it costs now, but it's probably double. And I think my doctoral program, I think it was about $1,000 a unit, I think. And I think 9 units was full time, and each class was about 3 hours, 4 hours in the summer, 3 hours in the regular semester. So you were in school like 3 hours or 9 hours, at least 9 hours a day. And in my program, you had to have two practicums. One was 20 hours a week. The next one was like 24 hours a week. And so you were working for free for 20 hours a week on top of a 9 hour, you know, in class. And then the load of work you had to do was definitely grad level, as well as your dissertation group that you'd have to meet with once a week and doing work on your dissertation as well as lab work. I mean, it was a pretty crazy schedule. And, you know, I think I could have done it if I would have been able to manage. I mean, I managed for the amount of time that I did, but once things started going kind of haywire, it was hard to kind of try to manage it all, having like a crazy supervisor and, you know, other issues that I wasn't managing, and then, you know, not knowing that I don't think I was even aware that I was having issues that I wasn't managing, or to get help for it. I didn't get any help for it. I didn't even think. It's crazy, right? Like, I'm in the field of psychology having all these like weird issues, and I don't even think to like consult, you know, the free therapy that I have on campus. Like, we had counselors and stuff. Like, I probably had it through the practicum site too. Like, I didn't even think about it. I don't know if I was like educated on it, or if they even told us, or if I even paid attention to it. I probably wouldn't have been ready to do it anyways, in all honesty. Because I mean, I was always kind of scared of therapy for a while. Again, because I never saw black people go to therapy. I was like, am I even supposed to do this? Like, this doesn't sound right. But, you know, like the black stuff, the LGBT stuff, it's gonna be there. You know, that stuff that isn't gonna change. Like, I'm not gonna change on that. So, you know, it's something that it's like, you know, you gotta work with it. You gotta work with the situations that come up based on it. The good thing about being in certain fields is you can become self-made and then you don't really have to deal so much with, other people having power over your life in certain ways. Other people kind of holding a degree over you, or holding a grade over you, or holding an educational program over you, or holding a job position over you, or a pay rate, just because of your race or your gender or your sexuality. If you can kind of, if you prove yourself, and you're a good worker, people see that. If you're not dramatic, if you're not causing problems, I always had this kind of very strict way about being at work, where I almost never talked about my personal life. I would talk about safe topics, like I go hiking, I go to the gym, I go out for dinner with people, I visit my parents. I'll talk about that. I'm not going to talk about the wild Pride weekend that I had, or why I took a week off for Pride, or like what party I was going to at Rich's, or whatever was going on the night before work. I would never bring that into work. People who knew me, who hung out with me at those places, or who talked to me outside of work, knew that that's what I was doing. But I wasn't talking about it at work. I wasn't talking about edibles. I wasn't, I was very professional at work. I was never talking about the unprofessional things that I was involved in. Even when people would ask me, I just wouldn't tell them. Or I'd tell them, if you want to hang out after work, we can talk about it, I would never bring it into work. I treated everybody equally, even the people I didn't like. I kept a distance. If people were talking crap about other people, I wouldn't stand there and listen. I would leave. I would never talk crap about people at work. After work, if I wanted to kind of chime in my opinion about somebody, I would always make sure it was with somebody who was very trusted, that I would trust would never say anything to anybody. I just had to trust them. I'm not sure if they were trustworthy or not, but I had to put my faith in them that they weren't gonna just go blab. But yeah, there were, I still do have a lot of people that I know that kind of want the dirt on everybody, because I am kind of in touch with a lot of people. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's just one of those things that's very there's a lot of different layers to it. And I don't think people have to come out. I'm a big believer that if people don't want to, they shouldn't have to. If you're at work, people don't need to be asking you what your religion is, what your political affiliation is, your sexuality, your gender identity. The gender identity is a little bit more of a difficult thing, because if you're talking pronouns, people might have questions. You don't have to answer them, but people might have questions, or people might notice something. Like if I say that my pronouns are they, them, and I'm just like walking around at work, people are going to kind of like have an assumption, okay, you identify your pronouns as they, them, instead of she, her. People would kind of assume something out of that. If I write it in my emails or my LinkedIn or whatever it may be, people might have I'm not saying they're going to have a problem with it. I'm just saying they're going to have that in a way is kind of like almost outing yourself in a way, kind of, not fully, but it's kind of outing yourself, just because, it is a group of pronouns that, kind of implies maybe that you're non-conforming to a gender, or maybe non-binary. I don't know, like who knows what the label is that a person might be using for their gender. But if they mention pronouns, people are going to possibly assume, oh, your gender, you might identify this way with your gender, or you're part of the LGBTQ plus community. You don't have to do that either. I mean, I don't put my pronouns on anything. Like, even though people are like, you should put your pronouns on your email. Like, no. Like, if you don't know me, like, I don't see any reason why. I'm a big believer. Like, if you don't know me, you don't need to know my background. You don't need to know my identity. You don't need to know where my parents are from. You don't need to know. I mean, of course, I put it all over the internet, but it's like, if you don't know me personally, in my day-to-day life, if you're some stranger looking at my resume or whatever, you know, I'm not giving people the power to kind of have more reasons to kind of like have an issue. There are a lot of things I don't put up front because I know that people are prejudiced, and but also, people at some companies are trying to be more inclusive, and so because they're trying to be more inclusive, they're because they're trying to be more inclusive, they're saying certain things. Them trying to be inclusive, leads them to maybe be seeking out different LGBT populations of people, or different ethnic minority groups, or different, gender identities. They might be seeking certain people for their company. I have heard people directly state that, but then also it's like, are they equipped to kind of like deal with your type of people? That's a whole other question. It is some kind of, cultural learning experience that goes along with that too. But that's kind of the main way I've been looking at things, is really just, study the successful people in the field where you're trying to be, see what they do, see how they get where they're going. It's often not a glamorous route. When I explain how I got a master's degree, it's not like I said, like, I studied a lot. I would spend a lot of my weekends, I think it wasn't until, I don't remember when in college, I had this youth pastor that was like, you need to take at least one day off. He was a really successful millionaire, entrepreneur, and I was like, okay, well, he's successful, and he is saying, because he would have us over, a group of us over at his house for like movies and pizza every Saturday night, and me and a couple of my really studious friends would be like, we can't go out Saturday nights, and because we had the Sabbath, we didn't study on Friday night or Saturday, until sundown, and so we used to wait till Saturday sundown and then just get back to studying. And he was like, you need an actual break, because we were in a religion where we'd be at church all like Friday nights we'd be involved in church stuff, Saturdays in the daytime we'd be involved in church stuff, and so we really didn't have free time. It was still like scheduled time, and the only time we started having was those Saturday nights where we would do pizza and movies at his place. And my grades didn't suffer. I think I probably felt more rested and more balanced taking one full day off, going out once a week. But I had other friends that, they never studied. We would always invite all of our friends to study. We were all in the same cohort together, and a lot of them never wanted to study. But we studied every day after school. We'd study outside of our houses, and then, weekends we would study. Sunday mornings I would wake up early, eat breakfast, and go to the library when it opened, or go to the coffee shop, I studied better outside of the house, even though it sucked. You know, I got out of the house and I studied, you know, and it's not the easiest thing to do, but, you know, I followed people that were doing well, and that's what they did, so that's what I did. And, you know, with work, things went a little different, just mostly because in the field of psychology, I never really wanted to be licensed. I kind of knew, I was like, I don't see myself really opening a private practice and trying to do this for the rest of my life. And, you know, I always wanted to pursue something else. So I was like, it was always a for now. I was always good at it. You know, I have some kind of talent in the field, but it's just not the right fit for me. Um, but that's kind of how I would tie everything together for people who are trying to look for successful methods. See what the successful people are doing in the field you're trying to get into. Find those people around you, even if they're online only. Follow their, not just one person, like kind of compile multiple methods that you hear people saying, and you're going to start hearing the same thing. Okay, people waking up early, exercising. There's a lot of stuff that they're doing that if you're not doing it, you know, it might be harder to get to where they're at if everybody else is doing it that way. So that's it for now.